Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and we'll be talking about all things cloud. Thank you for the recent subscriptions across my platforms. We're now not too far away from reaching the 100 subscriptions needed on YouTube to register the channel name. If you haven't subscribed yet, and I know I keep asking, please do. And of course, if you can share out onto your own social networks, that would be brilliant. So here we go, episode number 4. Have you ever had an idea and you want to quickly prove it out? Or have you wanted to build out a scenario to expand your own skills, whether that is development, design, or perhaps some other skills? You've probably heard about hackathon events in recent years, and that's what we'll be focusing on in this episode. I'm very excited to introduce my second guest of the show, Maria Vrabie, a very good friend who has plenty of experience with hackathons, both participating in them and organising or mentoring for them. It's a very insightful session, so let's go ahead and find out more about Maria's experience with hackathons. Here we go. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris, and we've got an interesting topic for today's session. So when you think about all those times where you've got an idea, you want to go and do something with it, you want to go and transform it into something, and where do you start? Where do you actually go with this? And one of the things that we hear a lot about in our industry and a lot about in technology these days is hackathons. And I'm very delighted today to bring in a colleague, a friend, and my mentee as well, I have to say, Maria Vrabie. Maria, hello.
Hello, Chris. Thank you for the invitation and for the kind words as well.
No worries. It's a pleasure to speak to you as always. So today we're going to be talking about hackathons. I know it's something that you're very passionate about. It's something you've done a lot in the past as well, right?
Awesome. Yeah, it actually all started since back my time in university, which seems such a long time ago now.
So university was the first time you did a hackathon then?
Yes, so actually back then all the hackathon hype, so to say, was just starting. So I was in my second year, and there was this student society called KCL Tech Society, and they were
Hmm.
organizing this hackathon thing. And
Mm,
obviously, a student hackathon is fairly different from, let's say, a corporate hackathon and a
sure.
company hackathon. But at that time, it was an event over the weekend, so from Saturday morning to Sunday afternoon, and we're just supposed to form a team or come with
Mhm.
a already predefined teams to build something and present it at the end. And what was cool about it, the event was free to attend. Um, and also there were loads of sponsors. There were some cool non-cash prizes, so things like really nice keyboard or game
Nice.
passes. So that's kind of how it all started as well. It was really interesting because the president of that society and the co-president were my friends, and they were the ones that encouraged me to go. It will be fun, and also a weekend of free food. And let's be honest, when free food and students go together, that's a great combo.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, I heard free food, I heard prizes, all things that students are going to love. So I think there's been a lot of hooks to get you, get you started there when you were back in university. So I'm really intrigued. You mentioned that was the first hackathon you did. What was the thing you worked on there? What was the project? What was the idea? And how did it go?
Sure. So I must confess, we spent half of the time just battling Android Studio. So we
Okay.
we built a project, an Android app that was to
Hmm.
be more was meant more as a treasure hunt. So, for example, we integrated with some Maps APIs, and let's say you go through London, and you need to have and to complete different challenges. And on the way, you need to stop to different restaurants, and you would get food prizes as well. It was very funny because one of the sponsors for the hackathon was a very known food company there. So we were trying to
Right.
integrate with their services as well to win from their side. So it was a very interesting experience.
Awesome. So you were already doing your market research, you were already targeting your audience. Love it. Love it.
Exactly.
When you think, you started doing hackathons and things at university, and I know it's still something that you're involved in as well from when we regularly speak with each other. So how have things maybe changed over that time? Have you noticed any kind of differences? Maybe what kind of hackathons have you been involved with since? Maybe let's start there.
Sure. So apart from the university hackathons that I was from both sides, firstly from just as a participant, right, a part of a team that would just build something over a couple of days. I was also on the organizer side, so dealing with all the event organizing part. In addition to that, since I started working for Microsoft, I have been involved with a couple of open hacks that we do with our customers. And there I
Mm.
was either a mentor, and also I was involved in a couple of hacks. So we had a
Hmm.
couple of charities coming into our offices, which was really awesome to do also
Awesome.
some work for good. And then each team had a project with them, and we're just building together for a couple of days. So a mixture of events, I would say.
Gotcha. So you've had the kind of the corporate one, the giving back, and the charity one, and then the student ones where it all originated. Awesome. So you've got this journey of all these different types of events that you've been to, and not just attended and actually been one of the developers or one of the team members, but now in that mentoring role as well. So literally giving back from, I guess, a journey that you've started on. Really awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, what is maybe before we jump into some of your, I guess, learnings and experiences and things that you've found along the way? What's maybe one of those most memorable things that has happened? Good, bad, the ugly. What are some of those key moments that stand out for you along that journey?
Sure, there is a funny one as well. When I was actually on the organizer side, so
Mm,
there was this student hackathon called Hack London. It's still going nowadays, but it's one of the very first editions.
hmm.
And at a student hackathon, you would have to make sure that everyone is fed. As I mentioned before, you have sponsors, and we used to call this the flying breakfast. Basically, what happened, there was Sunday morning, and after a night of coding, people were just waiting for the food, and we took care of it before. We did a huge supermarket order, so
Hmm.
everything was set. But then when the time arrived for the food was not there, only
Oh
for us
no.
to realize that it arrived a week before and someone else signed for it.
Oh no! So someone got a free breakfast just for being there a week earlier, and
Exactly.
all of your attendees are, oh man. So I guess there was a lot of scrambling at that point and figuring out how you could resolve that problem quite quickly.
Exactly. And it was, looking back now, it always sounds funny. It was a lot of working under pressure back then,
Oh, I can
because
imagine.
having so many people under one roof and needing food on a Sunday morning wasn't too easy. But in the end, we managed it. But I think that was one of the most funny situation, I would say, for sure.
Funny to look back on, not funny to be at the time. No, completely
Exactly.
understand. Completely understand. And I think, that's maybe even something I wasn't really thinking about, but is a really good point for any of the listeners hearing about this hackathon experience, right? Is it's not just about the um it's not just about the actual building of the things and forming the teams and what that project is going to be and those different ideas and bringing that together, but it's also the well-being of all of your attendees, right? Because the whole idea of a hackathon is you're there for that period of time, and you mentioned like there was an overnight one. So the well-being of making sure that everyone's got enough food, that they're rested, that they're looking after their own health as well is just as important, right? And that's something you need to think about as well. So that's a really good call out, actually. Really good call out.
Exactly. And I think there were a couple of conversations now. How do we even make these events more healthy, even from a food perspective?
Mm.
Because when you think about hackers or programmers in general, right, we all love pizza and maybe some,
Yeah,
things like Red Bull. But then how do we make all of this and make into a more healthy habit while still achieving the same goal? So i-
exactly.
interesting.
So then let's move on a little bit here. Let's think about the experience that you've got from where you've attended and where you've gone into this role of like mentoring and arranging and organizing some of these hackathons as well. So, what are some of those main things that you've learned that you know someone's going to start a brand new hackathon? They want to go and arrange something. They've got an idea. They've got something that they want to get out there. What tips do you have for those folks who might want to start off with that?
Sure. So when I think, for example, maybe at a corporate hackathon or a company that would like to build one, I would first think of a purpose. Why do we
Hmm.
have a hackathon? Hackathons are really cool and can be a very nice experience, right? You get a team together and you work together for the same purpose.
Hmm.
However, if you don't have a defined purpose, things can be challenging and may not go that smooth in the end. So I will recommend, for example, maybe you want to try something out. If something would work for your team, integrate a specific technology in your platform, and you want to take your team out for 2 days and just focus on that.
Mm.
Or maybe you just want to try if something else works or not and do sort of a POC as a proof. So I would
Mm.
say first the purpose of it, if that would be one of the first advice.
Gotcha. So have a really clearly defined problem. We're either going to, build this new feature and functionality, prove it out, prove that it works, and do some very lightweight testing and scenarios around it, or just come up with a scenario where you're trying to innovate around a specific use case. For example, it's really having that grounding of why are we all here. So then you've got that common goal everyone can work towards. Then.
Exactly, and I'm very glad you mentioned about the testing part as well, because sometimes, we all live in an agile manner now, with iteration and test, and
Hmm.
sometimes hackathons do require just maybe putting something together to prove that it works, and then dealing with a proper development process as well.
Mm.
Now, again, it depends on the goal as well. Hackathon can as well be worked in an all agile manner, iterative testing, and so on.
So just because it's a very condensed amount of time doesn't mean you can forget about all your tests, is the message I'm hearing there. So for anyone listening in, don't feel like just because you've got a 24-hour or 48-hour thing going on means you can't do your tests. It sounds like you can still absolutely do that. So listening to some of our other episodes, because we've definitely got some thoughts on that one as well. So Maria, what else? I think you were going to mention some other tips for us there as well.
Awesome, sure. At the same time, I would say being organized, at the end of the day, a hackathon is like any other event, right? And
Mm.
hackathons themselves are just places for experimenting, so not really something organized. But for that to happen, you need to have the right setup. So making sure for things like you may not consider are important, like make sure the food is there, making sure all the Wi-Fi access, all the setup is done before, because what you don't want to do, you don't want to have everyone in the room, right, for a day and then spending half the day just to set up and install the right tools. So making sure you're good to go from the start line, or you
Mm.
know what it or entitles, what it takes actually, sorry, to achieve your goal. Maybe another thing to add would be, for example, if there is a, let's say, you would like to have a hackathon on trying on a specific technology, perhaps having a couple of SMEs in the room, so that if
Okay.
things go may not so predicted, you can have people that know well the technology, or whatever stack you're working with, to help and unblock certain things.
So having that SWAT team that you can call in, say, we've got this problem, can't figure out why on earth this thing is happening. Help us unblock, help us get going, so we can keep focusing on that grounded problem that we're trying to solve here. Let us be, focused and effective on what we're trying to solve and do here, and come in, help us unblock this, and get us going again.
Exactly. And I've actually seen this is one of the recent hackathons that I've attended as a mentor.
Mm.
So we had a hackathon for women and non-binary folks held at the Microsoft Reactor back in summer.
Awesome.
And then folks attended and teams were formed, but it happened in some teams, none of the folks were developers, right? So they needed
Oh,
some
okay.
guidance from the mentors. But if the mentors weren't there, it would have been the smooth experience, right? You have to create an app, but maybe you don't even know where to start. So having someone there to guide them and to get them going, and it was really nice to see the excitement on the face of everyone that when they would create their first website or their first
Sure.
API call. So that definitely a good one to take into consideration.
That's really inspiring, because I guess I have the preconception, and it's not necessarily good or a bad preconception. It's just that image that you think of hackathon and you think of people who have been developers and technologists for such a long time, but actually to give them that experience to go throw themselves into this experience where they can create their first application, their first deliverable from a technology perspective. That's amazing. That's a really good way of allowing people to test themselves out and to try something new. Love that idea. Awesome.
Exactly. And what I love about these folks is that the excitement is real on their face. As I mentioned, once they have their first thing working. So that's really awesome to be present in that moment, I would say.
So then we've talked about tips for people that setting themselves up on that journey, getting started. But what are those subtle differences that make a good hackathon become a great hackathon? I think you've given us a couple of those tidbits already, but do you think there's anything top of mind that really you think takes it to that next level, would you say?
Sure, I think there are a couple of things that definitely would make for a smoother experience. Um, One thing I would say first would be the purpose, making sure that you have an end clear goal because hackathons are time consuming, right? And if, for example, if you look in our team as well, if we were to do a hackathon, that means obviously
Mhm.
people will be out from their desk to build something
Mhm.
really cool, but then we have to make sure that we are very clear on the purpose, on the end goal. That's what I would say would be one of the
Uh,
first. And also to make sure that hackathons are about coming together and working together, making
mhm.
sure that this is still maintained during that whole process, to make sure that the teamwork and that everyone is heard. Maintaining all that inclusive environment.
Mhm.
I think there's definitely some things to take into consideration and make a hackathon uh, greater, I would say.
And I think that's such a really important topic there because there's this saying that if you're not deliberately including people, then you could potentially be excluding people, right? Because you're not fostering that environment, you're not fostering that scenario where you are bringing everyone in and letting everyone bring their best to the table. And that's again so important in this scenario where it's not necessarily normal, right? You're coming together as a team, you're solving a problem in a very short space of time, so it really does require everyone to bring their A game, to come together and really focus on how they can work together and bring the best out of each other as well, not just themselves, right? So that's really, really key there. That's a really good point. So then maybe if we keep moving on, because I'm loving these ideas, if we think then about our day to day, right? The types of organizations that we work with might be very small and medium sized customers, startups, or even wide ranging to large enterprises and, across different industries, for example. I think one of the things that you and I see a lot because of the types of discussions that we have normally, we see customers that are focused on their DevOps transformation and moving away from that kind of waterfall approach, going into a more agile approach, and bringing all these DevOps principles and how they iterate over things and whatnot. But one of the things that I'm really interested in and I speak a lot about is this idea of focusing on things like requirements, for example, and how they bring requirements to the table and validate some of those requirements. So there's a couple of things top of mind for me here. So when you do these kinds of hackathons, these kinds of events, how much focus is there? We've talked about this idea that it's important to have that problem well understood. And that almost sounds a little bit like requirements or designing to some kind of specification. How much of that upfront planning do you see as being important? So that idea of this is what good for us will look like. This is how we know the project is delivered. This is how we know that we've achieved what we set out to achieve. Do you get what I'm kind of getting at there? I'm curious about the requirements side of things.
Sure. I definitely think, as with any project, requirements are really important because it gives you a purpose what you're working towards, and as well a good way to measure how you're doing towards certain goals. Actually, remembering now one of the open hacks we had in Microsoft, um, we had different customers coming in with different problems and challenges to be solved in those 4 days. So in the beginning, we tried to establish, let's say, the V1 version of that POC, that MVP requirements, so that we know what we would like definitely to achieve after those 4 days. And then we also made a list of extra things which are good to have, but not necessary. And it sounds quite a formal process, but actually gave the team a really good vision of what we should look like and how we can adapt, let's say, after the first day comparing where we are in terms of those requirements. It didn't have to be anything, formal, just maybe a whiteboard, some diagrams, some visio diagrams as well, just something
Mm.
to work towards. So definitely very important. I will also recommend, no matter the length of the hackathon, even if it's a day, if you have a goal or a purpose to work towards, and that starts from the requirements. So huge fan of requirements as well, as you can see here as well.
There was something quite subtle in there that you said, but I think, again, just bringing it to the forefront here is that idea of you're going to do that planning up front. Things are going to change. You might need to reprioritize different things. There might be certain things that you go, you know what, we've met that, awesome, but we won't be able to meet that in the period of time we have left. And it's that idea of bringing that DevOps mindset to the table as well, that idea of we've got these sprints. Admittedly, our sprint in this scenario is very, very short. It's like a day or a few hours or whatever it may be. And we just need to be very agile, react to what we need to achieve, realistically look at what we're going to achieve in that time, and then adjust and course correct and use the telemetry and the monitoring and all those things that we have to identify what things do we need to prioritize on the backlog, what's our focus, and where do we go from there.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm really glad you mentioned that as well, because hackathons are also about a mindset of trying and also accepting that something may not work and quickly moving to something else. That's what
Mm.
hacks are about, just trying new things.
Yes, and I think that's a big thing in the DevOps space as well, right? Is this idea of experimentation, this idea that we're not always going to make the perfect system, we're not always going to make the perfect thing, but let's try it, let's prove it out. And you and I both know, right, this mantra: fail fast, fail as quick as you can, learn from it, move on, and be bigger and better the next time you go and try that thing.
Exactly, the learn, build, share approach.
Absolutely, absolutely. So then, if we think about some of those organizations that we typically work with as well, then some of them are, very good at this type of thing where they will go and maybe take an idea, run with it, build it, try it out, fail, start again, keep growing, and get where they need to go. What do you think some other organizations could learn from? So maybe those organizations that aren't as agile, aren't reacting as quickly to things, let's say. And is there anything that you think they could learn from these kind of hackathon approaches? Maybe they could try out some of their scenarios, POC out types of things. How have you seen that working out? Because I know you mentioned you've done this with a few enterprise kind of scenarios as well. So I'd be intrigued on how you've seen that working as well.
Sure. I can understand while taking your devs for 2, 3, or 4 days out of their normal role to try something that may or may not work can seem quite scary from one big enterprise organization perspective. However, I would say with a mindset that in those 3 or 4 days, you definitely have an answer if this is something that will suit the organization or not. It is worth it, taking the risk. I often hear I
Mm.
work a lot with the services from the AI stack that we have, and sometimes I hear that, oh, I'm not sure if it will work.
Hmm.
So I think maybe a hackathon type of approach, spending 2 or 3 days trying to put together a POC, can definitely lead to a good result and to a quicker decision as well, I would say. And I know I mentioned the AI workloads, but it's not just about the shiny new cool things. I know in our team we do a lot of lift and shift, so some data center migrations, right?
Hmm.
And I know actually about a hackathon that one of our colleagues tried to do, to just put for a week the customer and the partners working together trying to do that. So
Mm.
there are different ways, and it's not only just for the new and shiny. I would say it's good for any kind of workload out there.
Yeah, it could be to go and modernize something. It could be just to build that new functionality, and it doesn't have to be, as you say, the new and shiny. It could be that legacy application that's still there, but you need to comply with some kind of external event, and you need to build out that functionality. And I think the main thing that maybe we haven't said yet, but we're all people who love technology, and let's bring it back to that point earlier where you mentioned those people who've never developed anything and developed their first app. I think it's bringing that kind of excitement to people, isn't it? Because I'm sure there are times where, in the day to day, there are certain technologies we work with or certain things. And yeah, it can get frustrating when we don't fully understand the technology, how it works or how it all pins together. But that moment when you come together, maybe as a group and do this kind of hackathon experience and actually get that thing working. It's that sense of achievement and that sense of excitement and why we're all in this industry, right? And this idea of being able to use technology to solve some kind of problem. I think that's really what we try to get out of it, isn't it?
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned it coming together as a team as well, because this can be a really good team building experience as well. Putting everyone in the same room or same rooms for a couple of days, working towards the same problem, everyone bringing their own
Mm.
skills and ideas, it can be great, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's a really vital point, isn't it? That everyone thinks that hackathon means developer, and it doesn't necessarily. You need people who can plan, you need people who can design, you need people who can develop, you need the data scientists, depending on that problem domain and what exactly you're trying to achieve. You need different perspectives, different mindsets, and again, it's that idea of being inclusive, giving everyone that opportunity to bring their skill set and really approach that problem.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you don't need to be a developer in order to be able to participate and bring value and valuable input, I would say,
Mm.
to such projects as well. So completely agree on that side.
What would you say is the most interesting thing that you've seen being built, or the most exciting thing, and the thing that it really stands out to you when you think of all those hackathons you've been involved with? Is there anything particularly interesting that you have a story around of? That was particularly cool.
So I have taken part with one hackathon with one of our customers, and we built this really cool chatbot project. The customer is a big supermarket, and it was
Hmm.
really cool because we tried to do to that chatbot to solve a problem of going to the shop and realizing they don't have what you're looking for.
Mm.
So all the chatbot was connected to all the backend database with the stock databases. So you could check
Ah,
beforehand what's in the store. And what was
gotcha.
really cool as well, with some sensors placed in the store, you could also find where they are because let's be honest, we've all got lost at some point in a supermarket, or we've all lost some friends in a supermarket. So what that tried to tackle was also the location in the place. And there was no smoke and mirrors, as we sometimes say in the tech world, right? So it was really cool to see that actually working. So that's one of the cool projects that I've seen as well.
And I think that's especially relevant given the times that we're going through and some of the, people not being able to get their toilet roll and things with the current events going on in the world. So, a very worthy and a very relevant scenario, I think, to what's going on in current events there.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, are you still doing lots of hackathons? Are you still getting involved in those as well?
I still try to get involved when I can, especially maybe in over the weekend event. The diversity events are very close to my heart. So whenever I get a chance to either volunteer, just help at the event, or mentor, I try to put my hand up. But as well, if there is
Hmm.
any opportunity with our customers as well, I try and help offer my help as well.
Sure. And maybe as a closing point here, then what would you say to anyone who's listening in and thinking, right, this hackathon idea sounds really cool, but I don't quite feel confident enough to run my own, but I want to either get involved in one or maybe help out with one in some way. What would you say they should do? How do they get started? Where do they go? What do they start thinking about?
Sure. So I'm sure we have a mixed audience in here. For some, maybe for folks that do not work at Microsoft, there are loads of meetups out there every month on different teams. So go to those meetups. And then there are loads of folks that organize hackathons themselves there. So using this networking part to get involved. And I know getting involved in the first hackathon can seem pretty scary, as many folks see it as a competition, and it's totally not. So maybe just putting your hand up to volunteer, that can be a good way. Following maybe a hashtag on Twitter with the location where you are, um, and the different type
Mm,
of events going on, that may be one good place to start. As well as if I refer more from to a Microsoft audience, I know we have loads of internal open hackathons actually to the public going on. So that may be another way as well. Checking the Twitter handles. Um, that's where I would start.
excellent. Well, Maria, thank you so much. I think there's plenty that throughout this episode we've learned about, how hackathons are similar and have some of these concepts relating to DevOps, relating to things like requirements, which we've spoken about numerous times in Cloud with Chris as well, and really is a good accelerator for those kind of organizations that might be either starting their journey into cloud or might even be further along in the cloud, and they're just trying something new. They're re-energizing something, they're modernizing, they're trying something new. What I'm hearing is hackathons are so relevant here and could be a new way to just invigorate some of their teams and really get people excited about that journey they're on. So thank you for sharing the story, and thank you for sharing some of your tips and tricks here. I think they're going to be very valuable for folks listening in.
No problem, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. And if there is anything I can actually refer to your last question in terms of hackathons, folks can find me on LinkedIn as well, or on Twitter. So happy to help where I can as well.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you everyone for listening in. Well, there's certainly a lot for us to consider there. Remember, you don't have to be a developer to get involved in hackathons. Likewise, as we learned from Maria, it can be a brilliant way for you to try out a brand new skill. Making sure that you go in with a clear purpose and desired outcome is crucial. So take a look on your favourite search engine and also have a scan through Twitter for hackathon opportunities. Or of course, you could organise your own. Do you have a topic that you want to talk to me about? Or do you have someone in mind that could be great to interview? Then please get in touch on Facebook or Twitter at Cloud with Chris. Or alternatively, submit suggestions or book a slot on my website www.cloudwithchris.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, goodbye.